welcome to Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett on Empower Radio. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me. A lot of good stuff going on all over the planet. And if you have not had a chance to check out any of that, get busy because it changes every day. One of the most amazing things growing up as a kid was having my grandmother tell me all these wonderful stories about things that she did. And she was a very open-minded person. She read Fate magazine. She believed in ghosts. She did research with the pyramid energy, sitting under that, taking the vibes, all that good stuff before anybody could talk about that thing in public. And one of the other things that she did when I was, I can't remember, the year would have been somewhere around 1977 or 79, somewhere in that time period. She took a visit to the Monroe Institute to study how to have an out-of-body experience. That was one of the things that she really wanted to do. And according to my mom, that wasn't successful. But some of my experiences subsequently were her way of vicariously doing some things that she couldn't achieve. And it's so amazing the way that the world is connected. Right now, I'm having an opportunity to visit with the Monroe Institute spokesperson and also a very well-known representative for the facility. Carol, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so could you help me with that?
Well, yes, it's Spanish. It's de la Herran because I spent 46 years in Spain. I went for a junior year abroad program for 1 year and ended up staying for quite a while.
Quite a while, yeah.
I absolutely love the story of your grandmother. She must have been one of the first participants around here because they opened this facility in 78.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yes, it would have been because I was talking with my mom last night. We were trying to pinpoint when it was, and she was remembering it by the bedroom that I was in at that point. And she said, well, we were sitting on this bedroom and it was in this house. And so it had to have been.
I just think that's fabulous.
Oh, and, well, yeah.
Sorry she didn't have her out-of-body experience. That's one of the things we're famous for because Monroe did his original research and work around that. But the truth is people have so many other important experiences that now that's kind of like a secondary focus, at least as far as we present our programs, because there's so many other possibilities that I'm sure she had a lot of, both before she got here and afterwards.
Well, one of the things in my family also was that on my grandfather's side, his aunt was a psychic who dared to advertise the fact in the front yard. She had a sign out that said psychic in Baxter Springs, Kansas. So you can imagine the uproar that was stirred in the family dissension.
Well, you must have pretty good genes for this.
I've got characters in my family, that's for sure.
Well, someday you'll have to come and visit us.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, I have my own extraordinary experiences deal with nightlights, but I want to talk about you and what is going on there. There was a wonderful article recently at the Washington Post talking about what goes on here and following somebody through the Gateway Voyage, which is like a week-long experience.
Yes.
And what? Go ahead.
It was really an exciting thing for us because the reporter was there as a normal participant. She didn't, make a lot of to-do about being from any place special. And actually just went through the experience herself. And that's why the reporting is just so kind of down to earth and one-on-one about how it influenced her. But one thing that many participants notice is they spend an incredible week here getting to know other people that are kind of on the same wavelength, which is one of the great benefits because, like you say, you can't really talk about this to just anybody, even now. But here you can because it's normal. And then what I noticed, and I know a lot of participants that I've known personally, notice is when you go home, things seem different too, because actually the technology we use does give you the basics for more brain potential and being more balanced. And so that seems to make just your general life come more into balance.
I thought it was funny that one of the guys she was there with, he got an email that he shared with her from a daughter or relative who said, okay, have fun, but don't come back weird.
I know a lot of family members are concerned that it's some kind of cult group that we're going to, I mean, I even had a person here ask me one time, a local person, said, oh, is that place where they operate on brains? And I said, well, not exactly, because we do facilitate changes in our brain's capacity and potential, but we don't operate.
Well, the thing with the Hemi-Sync, I think, might be what a lot of people might have heard about. That's the technology that you use, the brainwave. Is it repatterning or patterning? How do you categorize that?
Well, actually, the technology is sound technology. There are different specific sounds in each ear that are slightly different. And this sort of encourages your brain to create inside your brain a new sound and a new brain wave that's exactly equivalent to the difference between these two sounds. So if I have a sound or a tone of 100 cycles per second in one ear and 104 in the other ear, your brain just automatically starts creating brain waves at the difference, in this case, would be 4 cycles per second, which happens to be delta brain waves, which is a very deeply relaxed state. It's very hard to move into these states on your own, and people can do it after lots of meditation, but with the help of the sound that kind of facilitates bringing you there and then holds you there, your brain actually learns how to do it. It's like when we learn how to do anything, and we create these new neural connections that facilitate actually moving back into that space anytime we want to at will.
Okay. That's a very, very powerful, I think, tool, because most people would think that that's impossible and that nothing, it's magic, nothing could create that. So how does that, when somebody first successfully succeeds at doing this, what's the reaction?
Well, it doesn't take long to successfully do this. And so a lot of times, when we have people come, maybe even just for a one-day open house, they say things like, "Oh my goodness, I've never meditated so deeply in my life. This is amazing. My mind chatter just stopped, and I didn't make any effort for that to happen." And so it really is like sustained meditation, but most of us don't have the number of hours that it would take of meditation in the normal fashion to be able to reach these states easily, whereas the sound helps us get there, stay there, and then learn how to do it on our own. And so this has brought about a lot of practical applications that don't have anything to do with going out of body, but, just like the example I gave you, moving into a deeply relaxed state. When I was training programs in Europe, I remember having this one guy who said, "Oh, I work for one of the ministries, and I'm always running around doing all this stuff." And then I kind of say, "Relax," and using the little cue words that we use, which would be focus 10. And he says, and I just kind of get relaxed, and I go about and I do more work easier, and it's just wonderful. So it's not only about going out of body, but it's giving you tools for a better life, which is probably in the end the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, it's applicable to anybody's situation. So it isn't this magical thinking. It's a tool. It's a technique. It's a process that can
be.
Yeah.
And as a tool, we don't have, even though we're talking sometimes about very mystical kinds of experiences, which can truly change your view of what life is all about. We don't have any dogmas attached to it. This is a tool for you to use, which, with whatever your life is all about. And so the basic idea is you come here, you learn the tools, have some experiences, and then take it home and use it the best way for you.
Okay. So what of all the experiences have been some of the most extraordinary? Can you share any of that?
Oh, I can share lots of them because
Good.
I'll share
Okay.
mostly my own because, I came here, I used to be a lawyer and I built musical instruments, so I wasn't into this at all. I came because, I was at JFK Airport one time with 3 kids and 10-hour delay, and so I thought, well, I'll take them around, show them the bookstores and stuff like that, and this book jumped off the shelf called Mega Brain, which is about increasing your brain potential, and it listed lots of different methods and places in the U.S. where you could do that. And when I was reading about the Monroe Institute, it said, that for accelerated learning, and as the mother of 3 kids, I thought, oh, well, that sounds good, so I bought the book, and then in the next chapter, it started talking about out-of-body experiences, which I had never heard of. And I thought, wow, that's really weird, but it sounds like fun. And so took me 2 years to get here because I couldn't figure out where it was. But I finally found the Institute. Of course, in those days, this was in '88, we didn't have internet. And,
yes.
So I got here. I was at a moment of crisis in my life on all levels. I had just recently separated from my husband. I had just recently lost a really cool, interesting job that I had with an American company building a theme park because they decided to come back to America. And then my mother suddenly died. And 10 days later, here I was at the Monroe Institute thinking this is probably not where I should be right now, but I couldn't figure out how not to be there. And so, I'm actually sleeping through a lot of the exercises and getting rather upset because, I lived in Spain and I was saying, I don't need to learn how to have a siesta. We do that all the time. This is just not, I wanted some experiences. And
you wanted results.
Yeah, exactly. And
now.
Absolutely. And they kept telling me, oh, don't worry about it. Your brain is getting it. And, if something's supposed to happen, it will. And I was like totally envious of this woman in the class who had been a nun who was having these absolutely amazing experiences on every single exercise. And I was just total jealous.
Yes.
And finally, about the 4th day of the course, something clicked, and I went into this state of total bliss that was kind of like nothing but everything. And it's like I knew everything, and it was just a total mystical experience. Like I kept saying to myself, now I know what eternity is like, which is like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But it was just so amazing. And so when I came back out of that, it wasn't that I really, it's like I had experienced it, and so that changed my whole view of maybe life isn't really what it seems to be. But then when I went home, things started falling in place, and people would appear and offer me possibilities to work at the expo and to do this and to do that without me making any particular effort to do any of it. And I thought, well, wow, that is really amazing. But then when I went on to some of the graduate programs is when some really fascinating experiences would happen. Is we have one program here called Lifeline, which, just by the way, we have a film crew right now in the Lifeline program that's going on from the History Channel that are going through the program with the participants, which is kind of exciting.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that means we on the outside will get to see some of that.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, at that time, again, I'm living in Spain. I come back from the program, and I go to the movies with my ex, because I kind of figured, well, you know, maybe now that I know a bit more, we can make it work again. So we were kind of getting back together, and we go to the movies, and all of a sudden they send us out of the movies to say, you know, we have to stop the movie because there's an emergency. So we go out, and we're jumping through these flames, and turns out the whole marquee of the movie is on fire.
Oh.
And so
okay.
I'm kind of standing there looking at this, saying to the guy next to me, gee, that is really weird that the marquee is on fire, but nothing else is, you know, and it's just like an electrical fire or something. And he said, no, that's not weird at all. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, everybody knows that this building has ghosts in it. Can't you tell? Look, there's 3 apartments above the movie house, and they're all empty because nobody will live there. And I thought, okay, weird,
Yeah.
but, you know. And so, of course, my husband hears this, and he says, that's it. I'll buy the apartments. Since you just went to that program, you can help the ghosts leave, and we'll make some money.
Whoa. Oh, I love that attitude. Okay.
And so I thought, well, no, that's a little strange. I don't think we'll do that, but maybe I can practice what I just learned. And so that night I try to get in touch, and I kind of feel like I'm in touch with these 2 older people that are sitting there waiting for their granddaughter to bring their grandchild, because they had never seen him. And it was their first grandchild, and they were sitting by this thing that looked like a little gas stove. And I'm thinking, well, I don't have a grandchild to bring him, but all of a sudden I did. And so I said, well, here's your grandchild, and they seemed to be quite happy with that, and then said, okay, well, now we can move on. We don't have to stay here any longer. And I'm thinking, well, now that's really interesting. Okay, so I'll move them along just as they had taught us how to do, because this is mostly people that are kind of confused. Maybe they don't know that they have passed on, or that they have passed on, but they still have something pending that they want to solve. And so I help them along. But next day, I'm starting to doubt that any of this happened. So I go and visit the meat store that was next to the theater, and I said, well, do you know anything about these ghosts this guy was telling me about? And they said, oh, well, it kind of happened when they tore the building down. And he said, you know, the last people in the building before they built the movie house was this older couple that apparently died because their gas heater wasn't working right. And when I heard that, my mouth kind of dropped. It was like, oh my goodness, I guess I really did talk to these people, you know? And I guess maybe I really did help them. And it was one of those turning points for me, like, well, you know, even though I haven't learned exactly how to go out of body, it doesn't matter. I can help people that on the other side that need help.
Right.
And so when 9/11 came around, there was a group of us from that class that were helping there at Ground Zero and things like that, because you can imagine, you know, you're sitting there at your computer and all of a sudden you don't exist anymore. It's a physical person. And so there was a lot of confusion about, well, where am I and what is this?
That had to have been an extraordinary experience.
It truly was. And sort of going back later, several days later, you could see that what we and probably many other people around the world had done really changed the energy there, from this terrible anxiety that you could feel at first to later, you know, a sense of calm and a different kind of feeling because these souls had been helped either by physical people on Earth that were helping them or people from the other side who'd come to help them across if they needed it. Not everybody needs help. A lot of people just seem to know exactly where to go and what to do, but there's always some that have a little more difficulty, especially if it's in a crisis kind of situation like that one was.
Okay. The thing is that when people come to the Monroe Institute, they're there for all different reasons. And like you're saying, they may not have that exact experience that they're going for, but it opens them to new possibilities and potentials. And we've got another half hour to go. So I want to kind of get into some of those potentials, like what you're talking about right now, that thing that we are not just the body. We are something else beyond and bigger than this little carcass that we travel around in. So I'd like to talk about that too. And if you're listening right now and you want to get more information, you can go online and check out the WashingtonPost.com for the article about that, or just do Google for the Monroe Institute. The website for the Monroe Institute is monroeinstitute.org. But the Washington Post article gives you a nice little synopsis of what this might be about. And it sounds like upcoming, we'll have the History Channel with an in-depth look for those who like to learn it. Yeah, well, and then, but the other thing too I wanted to talk about is how he got started in the time that he started. I was in radio and on and off still, participate at some level for 20 years. And so, knowing how important that audio connection is, I want to know a little bit more about Mr. Monroe.
That's a fascinating story.
So that, yeah, that's an amazing connection in itself. So, well, I guess what do we need to do? We'll do it. We'll take a quick break, because the other thing I want to talk about too is that you and I are going to continue having discussions and then introducing some of the people who you guys focus there through this show. And I'm thank you. I'm so excited about that. Because
me too.
It's just this stuff is so simple to talk about and to just think about without developing any kind of an attitude or a judgment. It's just like, hey, check it out, learn, listen. If you want to try it, fine. If not, fine. But you don't hurt anything by educating yourself and becoming open to the potential that things here are not exactly stuck at the superficial surface level. There are more things going on, and your tools and your programs help people access that kind of awareness. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And on the practical level, it helps so many children, say, with ADHD, avoid having to take drugs to become more focused. Practical applications like managing pain. There's so many things that can be so useful to people, and to empower people. That's really one of the main issues here, is to let people know how much power they really have within themselves.
And see, that's just a happy marriage there with Empower Radio. We're doing it. Okay, I'm Wendy Garrett. This is Conscious Living. We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk more about the Monroe Institute and the programs that are there available to everyone. This isn't just a special group that you have to be part of. This is an amazing, amazing opportunity. Carol, and it's Sabick de la Herran. Is that Carol?
Yes, that's pretty good.
Okay, well, I'll work on it.
Carol is good.
Okay, good. Let's just do that. Yeah. Up next on Empower Radio. Hello, this is Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett on Empower Radio. And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time. If you've been listening, you'll know that this is a really interesting topic today. The Monroe Institute is an organization that's been doing this kind of work for years, 50-some, and it got started back in a time when most likely this wouldn't have been anything you wanted to talk about in your local social club. You just kind of do it clandestinely and say, wow. However, the remote viewers, I think, have given you guys a whole lot of press.
They have. I think Monroe's books have also contributed a lot because Monroe's personal experience was so fascinating because he really was like the pioneer in talking about anything like this. But the interesting part was, as you said before, Monroe was a radio person. He had some really important radio shows. One of them I even remember was called The Shadow.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and he had quiz shows and all kinds of stuff. And he was a very normal business person. He was not interested particularly in religion. He was a family person. He loved race cars and flying airplanes and things like that. He was really, really into his radio career, but had never thought anything about any of these things. But the time was coming when television was coming out. This is in 1958, 57, 58. And his company is thinking, well, do we want to go into television? Since we know so much about radio, that would be a logical choice. And he was thinking, well, maybe we could do something else. And he had heard that the Russians were actually using sound and to help people move into accelerated learning during sleep. And he thought, well, I wonder if we could do something like that, because that sounds so important. But the problem is, how do we get people into this state of light sleep? And he was living in New York. He was commuting to work every day. He was working at one of the big radio channels at the time as vice president. And he noticed that at a certain point in the road, with the clickety-clackety, clickety-clack of the train, that people would start nodding off. And so he realized that there was a connection probably between the sound that he was hearing, that they were hearing, and the fact that they were moving into this sleep state. And as a sound person in the radio, he just naturally started experimenting with sound and used himself as a guinea pig. But he started noticing he would get these kind of strange vibrations. And then one night, he's kind of laying down thinking about how he was going to fly in his glider plane the next day, and suddenly feels that he's fallen out of bed. He's looking around saying, but what is that funny-looking fountain coming out of the floor? And then he suddenly realizes that that funny-looking fountain was the chandelier on the ceiling. And then he suddenly thinks, well, I must be dead. And he looks down and he says, but who is that man sleeping in bed with my wife? And realizes that it's himself. So convinced that he's dead, he doesn't want to die, and so he swims back in the air and makes this big effort to get back into his body, and actually accomplishes that, sits up and thinks, well, I seem to be okay, but I must have some kind of serious brain tumor, or I must be going crazy or something. So he spends a lot of time visiting doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists to see if something's wrong with him, and they all decide that the only thing's wrong is that he smokes and he probably shouldn't.
Well, that's good news.
And so these strange things keep happening, and so he decides that since nobody can tell him anything about what's going on, that he might just want to research it himself. And he sets up this Quonset hut in his backyard and creates this little laboratory where he starts researching with the sound and then seeing if maybe these sounds that have affected him could affect other people to have similar kinds of experiences. And so from there, in 1958 up until like 75, when he gives his first program out at Esalen in California, it's kind of like an undercover thing that's going on. It's his obsession, but he continues working in the radio. And some scientists actually read some of his notes because he took copious notes about all of his experiences. And they think, oh, well, this could be really interesting to publish this. And Monroe, being an executive in a radio company, thinks, oh, no, this would be terrible if they find out that I do these weird things. I'll lose my job, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
And but they convince him that nobody at that level is going to be reading these kind of books anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, that's true.
Well, so then a week later, exactly 1 week after it's published, his boss invites him out on his yacht, and Monroe, sees the wife, and the wife is reading this book, and she says, oh, it's by somebody that's got your same name.
Oh, synchronicity.
And so he's discovered immediately, like 1 week after the book is published. His secret is out, but they didn't
And that's
fire
hilarious.
him.
That's hilarious because there's so many ways that could have just, been a happy secret.
Exactly.
And to have that just land on his doorstep, there's a whole lot more going into that.
So he, since, it didn't have any consequences, he just continued his second life, and it really was kind of a subculture, and he discovered that there was a large number of people in the U.S. and other parts of the world who talked about these things, but not in public. And so little by little, he started working with all of these volunteers that he had to identify the different sounds. There are actually patterns of sounds. It's not just one sound and another sound, but there's many levels of sounds that we hear in each ear. And so he identified the patterns of sounds that facilitated specific patterns of brain waves that were beneficial states of consciousness. And he gave those states of consciousness that he identified numbers because he didn't want it to sound esoteric in any way. He wanted this to be practical, pragmatic, and Western. He was like the Western way of moving into these non-physical kind of experiences.
And that's probably a really smart thing to do, because anytime you give something a name, then it gets all this baggage immediately without anybody even knowing what it is.
Exactly.
So, all right, now, and we're talking again, Carol is the executive director, president of the Monroe Institute. This is, again, you're saying he started and went from, 1958 into the 70s. And so when did the Monroe Institute open?
Well, after he gave his first classes, out at Esalen, he gave a few more in other places. He actually wired up a motel not too far from here so that they could give classes there, and had some interesting experiences. But he thought, it'd really be best to have my own place where we could have it permanently wired and prepared for this. And so he bought this property. It happens to be called Robert's Mountain, which has nothing to do with Robert Monroe, but that's the name of the street and everything, Robert's Mountain.
Wow.
And created our first residential center, which is called the Nancy Penn Center, named after his wife, who assisted him greatly in this whole effort. And so we started giving classes here in 78, and the programs are like 1 week long, and you come here and sort of are in a very special environment for a week with up to 23 other participants. We have very small classes, and we are a nonprofit organization that basically is dedicated to education through our programs and research, because we are researching consciousness. And that is one of the efforts that has been made over time, and we're kind of pumping that up again because we have some new technological advances coming out now that is it's like a second generation technology that we're using. So we're really looking forward to working with universities and researchers and hospitals because we know that this can really help people recover quicker. We know that it can help people use less anesthesia during surgery, things like that.
Well, I think, connecting it to the healing factor, I think that's fabulous because a lot of this stuff, I've had some throughout my life extraordinary experiences. The out-of-body thing was triggered when I had my wisdom teeth out, and I was looking over the shoulder as my dentist was working. I could see the blood, and I'm like, whoa, wow, that's intense. And I'm just watching him work on this patient and thinking, that's interesting. I was fascinated by the process. Well, I get out in the car when my mom picks me up, and I realize that was me looking at myself because I didn't connect until that point when I'm trying to tell her about what happened, that I was out of my body and watching him perform that. So that was, that's just the basic stuff. But
that is so fascinating because that's exactly what happened to me, getting my wisdom teeth out.
It's like, okay,
yeah,
there you go.
I was looking up, seeing this, thinking, oh, that poor lady, what are they doing to her? And then I realized it was me, and I just freaked out.
Well, it's the thing that when it happens like that, at first you don't know how to share it or what triggered it to how to recreate it. Mm-hmm. But the thing with me was that other things just kept happening, becoming aware of spirit guides, of guardian angels, of ghosts, of all this other stuff. It just unfolded. And I worked in radio. I know how incredibly influential these things are to people. Everything that we are doing is programming us in some way, shape, or form. And I knew as I chose my profession or didn't choose, allowed things to happen, that it would take me a certain way. And at one point, when I stepped away from the news aspect, because I didn't want to just be a parrot for everything and repeat everything, I wanted to be part of the creative end of it, and doing this kind of show and these kinds of things, because I know my reality isn't just something that I'm going through, that there are, and the amazing thing with the internet, there are thousands, if not millions of other people who are having these experiences that don't come into any kind of specific category, and they have nowhere to go, nowhere to say, help. What am I doing? And how is this happening? And that's what your organization is part of, is that helping people connect the dots. That's why I wanted to do this show.
Well, and that's very true. We have many, many people who come here because they've had some kind of experience and either want to move back into that same space or because they want to try to understand what on earth is going on. But we also have lots of like engineers and doctors who come just out of total curiosity for something that they know absolutely nothing about. And because of the help of the technology.
Okay, we're getting feedback on that, and it's probably because as we continue to talk, her energy continues to be more dynamic, and that's some of the things that some of the the issues when you're an energy worker or you do this kind of engagement, that it does create an impact. So it's not a surprise. So I'm just, trying to give you, if you're listening, an idea that this is the stuff you work around as you do these things. Our technology isn't yet set to equalize or balance this kind of being yet. And I think that's fabulous. So, Carol, are you... Yes, still vibing.
Okay, well, I'll try to calm down.
No, see that to me, when you try to explain this stuff to people, and I worked in radio, it's like, well, you fried the board. This doesn't work and that doesn't work. It's like, okay, yeah. Or the cash register freezes up. And they just don't get it, that there's actually something biological, physical, physiological, something is happening between my electrical system in my body and the other current that's around me. And I do this with nightlights. I've been doing it since 1997, engaging with another form of conscious awareness beyond mine. And that for me happened. It just was a shift, and I worked to elevate my energy. As I did that, I became more aware of how to heal and how to shift my thoughts and all of that stuff just through my own experience and reading extraordinary volumes of, maybe I should say copious amounts of stuff to try and figure out and integrate this so I could maintain my sanity isn't the right word, but it's a good one.
Well, for some people, that really, it comes down to maintaining their sanity, because it really can be disturbing because they don't know what's happening.
It's very disconcerting when you are aware of yourself here in the physical body and you feel yourself standing or look at your arms and see this identical twin non-physical body right beside you, especially when you're driving a car. Those kinds of things are like, holy cow. undo, rewind, help. And about the time you maintain, when you realize that's what's happening, usually that just slips you right back in. But these experiences, I think, are part of our natural evolution of consciousness. So when you state that as one of the main platforms that you have, I think that's right on the money. That we are evolving, and some of these things are brand new. People haven't demonstrated this level of ability prior to now. Is that, am I off base?
Well, or at least not so many people. It used to be something that belonged to a privileged few, and now, especially with the technology, it's open to everyone. And that is what makes a tremendous difference, that you don't have to be born with special talents to be able to move into these states and experience what meditators talk about as this blissful state or this internal joy or these wonderful communions or connections with beings from other levels. And that, to me, was so exciting, because I know for myself I would never have been able to do this on my own. I wasn't born into a family that talked about this. I was born into a place where in church, if I would see something, which I did once in a while, I got spanked. And so I immediately turned it all off, because this was not acceptable kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And with that, being able to reopen that channel, shall we say, and and feel that it's something that truly is a part of everyone, and that many people, because of cultural conditioning, aren't aware of all of these latent abilities that we have to, well, even just to connect with our creativity or our intuition, which can be very practical kind of aspects of this work. We have that ability. It's just that sometimes it's been by our education system that puts a premium on left brain kind of rote learning more than the creative, intuitive aspects of learning. Things like that can be reawakened.
Well, and there's a tremendous need for more balance. My stuff with this is, I suspect that as we have become more technologically advanced and become more inundated and exposed to electrical waves and beams and particles and that kind of stuff, I think that has had an impact on us physiologically and helped to trigger and engage these other levels that before we really didn't have access to on such a grand scale. I think. And he hit it on the money when radio. This is like having a radio station. When I was a kid, if there was something that frightened me, I just changed the dial. Oh, okay, no, not yet. And consciously said, I'm not ready. And then when I was ready, it was basically a level of being relaxed and open and not frightened, intimidated, but taking the fear away and saying, I trust that I'm okay. And developing that to the next level. But it was a lot of brain work, a lot of, telling myself and walking myself through it. That just, and experiencing these non-physical encounters in a dream state or a vision state, and having to say, I'm okay. This is my reality, and I'm okay here. I'm not threatened.
And I'm always reminded of the movie The Sixth Sense, where, when it's you're focusing on the scary part and everything, it just gets scarier and scarier. But when you're able to turn it around and say, well, I'm going to help someone, like the case I was talking about, the couple that was kind of stuck waiting for their grandchild, then you move into a space where everything that you attract on other levels is at the same kind of vibration, which is so beautiful and so positive that it really does affect all parts of your life. Every aspect of you is changed by this, moving into this helping, contributing, loving kind of space that makes a difference both on this level and on the other levels. And you learn that, it, depending on how you are, you attract or you relate to beings that it's just so beautiful and such a lovely experience that it really is, I think, an important part of life that many people would otherwise miss if they didn't have the chance to just hear about it. Because just talking about it, like on this radio station, I think it empowers people to know that, well, yes, this is something I can do, and it's not scary, and it's not bad, and it's not weird.
I agree. The two things that I know that were part of my expansion was the thing that there's an inner sense of do no harm, and then the other thing is to share. Those two things are extremely important, I think.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have to wrap. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is like it went way too fast. So, okay, the good news is that we're going to continue the dialogue, and Carol will most likely come back just in terms of giving us an idea of what else is going on at the Monroe Institute. And then we have some other opportunities to connect with some of the people that you might, if you're planning to make a trip or find out more, you might hear about or have a chance to see in person, who are also supported and presented at the Monroe Institute. Is that a good way of summarizing it?
That sounds great.
See, the thing is, Carol and I haven't got this all down in writing. We're just kind of working our way through it. And one way or the other, it will evolve like everything else is doing right now and does as we exist in this reality. We evolve. That's the wonderful part of it. But I really do appreciate your time today. And please, we've got 3 more minutes. What would you like to add before we wrap up?
Well, if you're in the area, we are located in Virginia, south of Charlottesville. We do have one open house each month that you can see the dates on our website, and that's a real easy way to get in touch with us and see what's going on. It's free, and we have exercises in our special. They're like Thomas Jefferson beds. Our little beds are enclosed in walls because they're like semi-isolation units, if you want it to be that way, though you can open it up, and experience what it's like to be here, feel the energy of the location, and just join us for a day in the lovely Blue Ridge Mountains. We'd be very pleased to have you. And if not, well, check us out on the website, and we do also sell CDs that people can start working with at home, which is a very good way to get started.
And then Barbara Monroe's books, that's what a lot of people, got started with in terms of my grandmother. That's how she found out about it, was that information, talking about out-of-body experiences, to give you an idea across the board of how somebody at the time that he was doing it became fascinated with this other state of being, this other state of consciousness. So, that would be another. And
see his evolution through this. It's just a fascinating story because since he was such a normal guy, we can all relate to it very easily.
Yes, I can vouch for normal radio. It's just you get there's a whole lot of fun going on there. You get to play doing all sorts of exciting shows and making commercials and that. And then life comes in and goes, look at this. Check this out. Wow. Wow. All right. So if you're listening, the Monroe Institute, it's monroeinstitute.org for more information. And I look forward to talking more with Carol and sharing more information of the things happening there now. And thank you for listening. We've got some more shows coming up. I'm Wendy Garrett. This is Conscious Living on Empower Radio.